Hey, this is Nathan Motz, and you're listening to the Seleção podcast.
Simões bending one for Torres. Eusebio. Oh my word! Have you ever seen anything like that?
Bem jogado por Simão, a passar por dois adversários, Simão a tentar oferecer o golo a Figo e a bola é golo! O golo de Figo!
Rui Costa vai, acreditou, vai tirar para o golo, atira, golo! 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 Cristiano Ronaldo, vai embora Cristiano Ronaldo, mete, bateu, golo! Ronaldo! Obrigado, Cristiano! Portugal vai Éder, chuta! Gol!
And we welcome you to episode number 75 of the Seleção podcast, a proud partner of Portugal.net. My name is Danny Pinto. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for tuning in once again as we have reached the end of 2022. By the time you guys, the majority of you hear this, it'll likely be 2023. So from my family to yours, I hope everyone had a great Christmas, and we all hope for a prosperous 2023. Prosperous is a key word in this episode, as of course we will we'll talk about someone who's going to be making a lot of money here in the next 2.5 years, but we'll get to that in a little bit here. But this is the last episode of 2022. Normally we have Tom Kundert with us to go ahead and close things out and review the year that was, but we will have a special guest. If you can already read at the bottom, it's not only Tom, but it's our buddy Nathan Motz, who's also joining us from Portugal as well, and we'll get to them here in just a few moments. But of course, what you guys have been doing all year, you guys have been bookmarking the podcast website, selecaopod.com. You've been following us on Twitter and on Instagram at selecaopod, facebook.com/selecaopod, and you've been emailing us, I should say, at selecaopod@gmail.com. You guys have been subscribing to us all year on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. This YouTube channel has been the thing that I've been most proud of so far, or thus far in 2022, as it's grown exponentially in terms of views and subscribers. So greatly appreciate you guys if you're watching, whether it be your first time or you've been doing it for the majority of the year. And last year too. Greatly appreciate you guys subscribing and having the show grow as much as it has. So I'm going to bring in now our distinguished panel, because I wasn't expecting a panel at the end of the year, but then Tom says, you know what, Danny, I've got a guest who you need to get on your show. And I'm like, who's this, Tom? And he goes, it's Nathan Motz. And I'm like, I've had him already. But he's like, no, we're going to do it together. Tom, so falto Simon Curtis, and we would have got the band back together from last year. But happy holidays, guys! Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. How's everybody doing? Tom, you first. You are the host for Nathan as well.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you, Dan, and your family, and all the listeners, of course, and their families. It's been quite a year, hasn't it? So it's a really good end to the year for me personally, with Nathan popping over to visit, getting rid of those Portuguese saudades. And looking forward to talking all things Seleção. And as usual, plenty for us to get our teeth into.
And Nathan, for you, I know you've been traveling here a little bit, but back home in the States, there's been a bit of a travel issue with airlines and everything. So I'm assuming that you just got on a plane that worked and found yourself in Portugal.
Yeah, I always seem to find a way to get where I need to be. So I'm pretty happy too, because I forgot how beautiful Portugal is. We talk about the football, which we all love, but just a reminder for anyone who hasn't been to Portugal, you need to get that on your list. It's an amazing place, so much to offer, good wine, and good food. So if you're into that sort of thing, you'll love Portugal. The football is just kind of an outpouring of all of that. So an overflowing of just the wealth of history and culture you find here in Portugal. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, wine is good for sure. Absolutely. So guys, normally this show, and Tom, you've been a part of my end of year shows here since we've been doing the shows together here and being part of Portugal.net. And I was all set this week. I was preparing, what happened during the summer and what happened in the beginning of the year and what was the catalyst for what happened at the World Cup. And then December came and we lost in the World Cup. And then Fernando Santos is gone. I'm like, okay, I'll wait maybe a little bit to see if anyone gets hired in his spot. And then Ronaldo does what I think a lot of us thought. Nah, he's never gonna go to Saudi Arabia. And then he goes to Saudi Arabia for a reported, $200 million a season with salary and incentives. And Tom, I guess I'll start with you first. I'm kind of in disbelief, and I'm kind of in. The word isn't disgusted because that's a strong word, but I just the last half of 2022, I don't think could have gone. In terms of a public, a PR campaign, I should say, I don't think it could have gone any worse for Ronaldo with the way things started this summer with Manchester United, the way that everything ended with Manchester United, in large part due to the interview with Piers Morgan, the debacle that was the World Cup for him, especially. After that South Korea match, and then pouring all the salt in the wound with Lionel Messi finally getting his World Cup. I mean, it's hard to say no to 500 million potentially, Tom, but I don't think this is the way that we all envisioned the last part of the Ronaldo career going. But I'll let you have your say here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely. I think you just said it there in a nutshell, Danny. Your last part of that, description of what's happened to Ronaldo these last few months, because we all kind of thought, this guy has just given us so much joy, so much pleasure, hasn't he? He's just given so much to Portuguese football, Portugal, the country itself. In some ways, he's put kind of Portugal on the map. Anywhere in the world, a lot of people, the only thing they know about Portugal, the only reason perhaps they know Portugal even exists is because of Cristiano Ronaldo. And so we all, like you just said, we kind of imagined these scenarios, how he's going to wind down his career, perhaps a year or two in the States, perhaps coming back to Sporting, perhaps even somewhere like Manchester United, or even playing a reduced role.
Tom, he almost did go to Sporting, Kansas City.
Yeah. Well, I think that would have been preferable because, we've basically just had a month, haven't we, of people talking a lot about morality and football and money and football and, what's important and what isn't in sport. And then here you go. Cristiano Ronaldo has gone off to, Saudi Arabia, which is basically, there's one reason why he's gone there. Nobody can have any doubts about that. And it's of course, it's disappointing, I suppose. It's easy for us to say from the outside, saying, he's got so much money, he'd never need to even think about earning more money. But, there's so many people. I suppose you have to remember with Ronaldo, it's not just Ronaldo himself, it's his whole entourage around him, family, friends, business people, who are set to perhaps, they're set for life probably through this deal. So it's so difficult, isn't it, Danny? I was thinking about this actually earlier, thinking about our previous pods and what we're going to talk about, and it's kind of hard to know how to talk about Portugal at the moment and Cristiano Ronaldo, because it's there's just so many question marks, isn't there? Will he continue for Portugal? We don't even know who the coach is. Will the coach who comes in, perhaps it's interesting talking to some Portuguese people here, and some friends, a lot of them are saying stuff like, which I think is understandable, if I was offered the Portugal coaching position now, the first thing I would want to know is, what do the FPF intend to do about Cristiano Ronaldo? Is it compulsory to call him up, even if it's in Saudi Arabia? In one way, you can still say, he's done so much for Portuguese football. Perhaps if he did accept that, a reduced role, a role off the bench or something, perhaps he still has a place, he still has a role to play for the Portuguese national team. But yeah, it's just, so many things. This is so fresh, isn't it? I was just saying, Danny, I only heard the news literally a few hours ago. And it's a bit of a disappointing end. I don't think we can really, put any kind of different spin on it. It's a bit of a disappointing end to his club career. Hopefully, he'll be able to bookmark his Portugal career still with something more positive.
And Nathan, I'll bring you in on this part here. It's I kind of look at his, and we don't know what the end is yet for Cristiano Ronaldo, but it does seem that we are at that point with perhaps the national team, perhaps thinking of him as a serious footballer with this move in terms of just where he went. But the one thing that I've kind of tried to temper myself to, because we're all creatures of the moment. Recency bias is a buzzword or a buzz term that gets thrown around nowadays. But for me, Nathan, I don't want to say that his legacy is tarnished, because he has to do a lot of damage. I think more than what he's done. I still think he's up there with the GOATs of this sport. But I think the vitriol that he has received, some self-inflicted, but I think a lot of it, it's almost with, and we'll talk about Fernando Santos later in the pod here, but I just compare it similarly to, we can always be thankful for Fernando Santos and what he did for us, and yet still be of the opinion that his time with the Seleção not only deservedly came to should have come to an end, but and should have come to an end maybe sooner than it did. We can always remember this part of the Ronaldo saga and be disappointed in it, but still praise the player and praise what he has done for not only for the country of Portugal, but for this national team, for the sport itself and the history. And we lost a giant in the first real superstar of the game in Pele earlier this week, and I also want to get you guys' thoughts on his legacy too. But I just hate to think, Nathan, that this is how he's going to be remembered by the majority of people who follow the sport.
I think that's a matter of framing, taking the perspective of your choosing, whatever that is. And it's worth remembering for a second here before we focus on this move to Saudi Arabia and what it means, that this is the end of 2 decades of one of the most dominant players ever to participate in European football, in the Champions League, in England, in Spain, in Italy, and for the motivations, whatever they might be, to conclude his career the way he has, to tarnish that, I think is in a football sense, it's not going to happen. There's nothing that's going to erase that legacy. Nothing will take away what he's done for Portugal, and I think that will be remembered. And I want to put a different spin on this too. I think, and this is for me as well, there is a little bit of selfishness on the part of supporters wanting Ronaldo to do things that we want him to do, because that's what we would do
100%
if we were in his position. But Ronaldo has always been an ambitious character, a larger-than-life character, and I think that as he concludes his career, in my opinion, what he may be doing is attempting to create the volume of wealth that may serve as fuel for his future endeavors, whatever those might be. And I can see Ronaldo kind of morphing into more of like a businessman, and maybe creating his own empire of sorts. And I can see this being just a move in that direction. Ronaldo is that type of person. We've seen, and a lot of people have criticized, all the commercializing that Ronaldo does. The underwear and the cologne and all the different things, the products that he sells. But
it's really good cologne, by the way.
Yeah. And I think this is Ronaldo for you. He's attempting to build something all the time with every move that he is making. And so I think he may be possibly looking beyond football here and not just thinking of kind of maybe what we would have wanted. Like I would have loved to have seen him come back to Sporting. That would have been more of the homecoming type ending. Or I was telling Tom the other day, I could have even seen him coming to the MLS in the United States, possibly. But there's a selfishness there that I think a lot of people, myself included, are going to have to let go, because at the end of the day, this is his way of concluding what was an unbelievable career writ large, just an incredible player that may never be surpassed again in our lifetime, especially from Portugal. But and really the only reason he might not be even spoken of more highly is because of Lionel Messi, and that's actually just more of a result of the press creating certain narratives about these two players. And I'm sure we'll have time to talk about that later. But Cristiano is a legend, and that won't change because he's playing in Saudi Arabia. Even if Nathan Motz would have preferred him to, go back to Sporting or to the MLS.
Yeah, Danny Pinto would have loved to have seen him come to America if this was the way that the career was going to end. Nathan, you mentioned a selfishness. I think there's a lot of romanticizing, I think, too, with the way that we all hoped it could have ended for Ronaldo. We would have hoped that we could have gotten that World Cup in Qatar to send him off to the sunset. Having him come back to Sporting, having him, which would have been 4 or 5 years ago. A crazy idea of him coming to the States and playing in the MLS, because 4 or 5 years ago he was still scoring 40 goals in Europe, and who would have thought? And I just think the right word there is a kind of a fan selfishness for as long as we've watched him. He just wanted that icing on the cake, that bow on top of the present that would have been, I guess, acceptable for the majority of fans. And yeah, we don't know what behind closed doors what his life is like. Professionally, it's been tumultuous in the last 6 months or so. Personally, I'll never want to know what he's dealt with in this calendar year. But for the man who is arguably the most famous person in the world, and maybe even Lionel Messi might be giving him a run for his money now because of the World Cup. But I could never understand what it takes to receive an offer like this, let alone accept it. But I just hope that he's always going to be the punching bag. Again, a lot of it's self-inflicted just because of the way he sometimes carries himself. But I just I think in terms of what he's done on the field, for anyone to quickly forget that, either A, has an axe to grind, or just doesn't appreciate the athlete that he was these last 15, almost 20 years.
Yeah, just one thing also, Danny, coming in, that is interesting what you were saying there. I mean, we're talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, and everyone's got an opinion, haven't they, on Cristiano Ronaldo, what he should do, what he shouldn't do. Imagine this was any other player. Obviously, if it was any other player, they wouldn't get this kind of offer. But if it was, just a player who wasn't so famous, wasn't so kind of, in in the front of people's minds, everyone who loves the sport of football and everyone who loves Portugal, if it was just any other player, no one would think twice about whether or not the player in question should take this offer. Saying, "What? You're crazy. Of course you should."
Yeah, they'd be questioning the club instead of the player. Whereas here,
exactly.
I have it scrolling on the bottom, Tom. He's cashing in, or maybe in a sense, maybe cashing out on the career that he has unbelievably put together. And that's something that should not be lost in this whole thing. It's like, again, the three of us are in agreement. It sucks that he's going to Saudi Arabia. It's not the way that we all hoped for. But who in their right mind, other than maybe him or Messi, at 37 years old, is cashing out on $500 million at 37 in this game? No one is doing that. And for me, as much as I don't like that he's going there, that's something that it needs to be at least appreciated that he's put himself in a situation because of the career that he's had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think too, it's worth repeating what Ronaldo himself said. I've accomplished everything there is to do in Europe. For him to stay, it's a little bit difficult to understand what more is there to pursue there. I really think he's trying to cement a different type of legacy now. I think he's going to be around the game a long time in a different capacity. I can see him, using the immense pull of his legacy to create the next phase, whatever that is for him. And it'll be interesting to see what that is. But, staying at Sporting, what is there for Ronaldo to do, exactly at Sporting, winning the Champions League? I mean, it's just not, when you do the math on that, it's a little bit difficult to understand what he would be accomplishing. So
now, I'll play devil's advocate on what you just said here, Nathan. It's easy to say that he's done everything in Europe now that there reportedly are no European offers coming in. Now, if he's going to, what does his legacy continue in if he got an offer to go to PSV, or if he goes to Spartak Moscow, or who cares? They're not winning Champions League, so I get what you're saying, but I think I guess the cynic, and there are those out there, and their opinions are out there as well. He's saying that he's conquered everything in Europe, which he has technically. It's time to go try something else new. Sometimes the situation also dictates that, but I think the nitpicking of this from the three of us, I think, is not even nitpicking, but just we don't like it. But I guess I'll ask you guys this: if someone offered you $500 million or 500 million euros, I don't care where. Would you? I'd take it for 2.5 years. Sure, why not? I'll be okay. It'd be hard pressed. I'd be hard pressed for someone to say no to 500 million. That's I guess that's my take on that. I don't know.
But I think so many people are going to focus on the sum of money, and I really don't think it's just about the money. I really do think this is Ronaldo acknowledging where he is in the game. Were he to stay in Europe, I do think he would, at now almost 38 years old, he'll be 38 in February, would struggle to build upon what he's already done. And maybe you could argue might leave an impression that he wasn't so good a player, which isn't true.
Sure.
It's just, and it's that recency bias that we've discussed, kind of giving opportunity for all of his critics to continue to either not just to mock him, but to misrepresent him and the legend that he truly was. And I think that this is a way of kind of checking out from that too. It's his decision. I'm moving on. Like I'm done with this era. Now I'm moving to something new. I mean, of course, it makes it easier. $500 million, right? But we all know that. But
it's not bad.
I think it's the closing of a chapter. I really do think that. And there is something psychologically appealing to that as well. So I think for anyone at any level to say this period of my existence is now concluded and I'm going to move on to the next phase, I really think there is something like that going on here too. Yeah,
I think you said it perfectly. I think it's I think we're all, and the majority of Portugal fans and Ronaldo fans, I think are coming at it from a more of a selfish kind of point of view, because we just, and I mentioned the term romanticizing. This was not the ending that we were all expecting. His unbelievable, once in a lifetime, once in a millennium kind of career. This is not the way that we were expecting him to kind of finish things up, or on the way to that. But, but it's not Danny's life or Tom's life or Nathan's life. It's Cristiano Ronaldo's life, and he's got every right to make whatever decision is in his best interest and in the best interest of his family and his support system. And I think the one thing I will say, Nathan, both of us living in the States, and Tom, obviously jump in on this one too. I haven't read any concrete numbers in terms of what Sporting Kansas City and the MLS or the States offer was, but and again, maybe it was the wrong time, because you used the term, Nathan, mocked, and I think that he has been mocked a lot in the last few months. And I think that there's the Saudi Arabia deal is $75 million per season from the club, and then with incentives and sponsorships, whatever it is, it goes up to almost about $200 million a year for Ronaldo. If he was maybe in a better state of mind, or better received, I think, media wise, I'd be hard pressed, Nathan, for him not to get that David Beckham LA Galaxy $250 million deal. That was 15 years ago, and that wasn't just salary. That was sponsorships and ownership stakes and all kinds of things. We're 15 years later, and with all respect to David Beckham, Ronaldo at 37, I think if he was in a better light media-wise, could have cashed in on something similar between what Beckham was signed on for with the MLS deal and the Saudi Arabia deal that he got. And I think that the American market is something that he has not tapped into much. I know that there's a lot more money out in the other parts of the world, but he could get that money no matter what. It's the American market that he has not been able to really kind of break through. And I thought that if there was any point in his career, it would have been now to get that American market, and getting that report that what was it, Sporting Kansas City had a very competitive offer with incentives and all that stuff too. I would have loved to have seen it, but it just obviously didn't come to fruition. But I would have hoped that the American market could have, I guess, maybe appeal to him a little bit more. But when you're making as much money as these guys are making now, you could be wherever you live, wherever you are. But
I wonder if he was growing tired of being in a place too where he hadn't kind of won over the affections of supporters. So in the Middle East, Ronaldo is worshipped all over. I've lived in the Middle East in my life, and I've seen it. In my opinion, he's more highly esteemed in that part of the world even than Messi. And so I think there could be some sense of him wanting to write the next chapter in a way which is just more comfortable.
Sure.
Not just financially, but in a way where he's not going to have the type of fictions written about him that would surely be written by a lot of the American media, which is heavily influenced by the British media, which we all know is not too kind towards Ronaldo all the time. And so I think that could have been a factor as well for him wanting to just be comfortable at this stage of his career, not wanting to have to deal with the media circus possibly. And he's going to get some of that seclusion. He could also argue there will be a little bit of an echo chamber there for him. I think the celebration that he will get will be very one-sided also. And so if he struggles, I would imagine that that could also be quite difficult, because I don't think they would be so quick to judge him or to help him obviously improve in his game. They would be just more inclined to pass over whatever difficulties he may be having on the pitch and just continue to praise him anyway. So, but and this may be just a fact that he's just getting older, and that's kind of what he's looking for in his life.
Tom, how many goals is he scoring next year? I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's funny though, but it's a valid question because I'm sure we'll move on to it now. You know, the other big side of this is, does he still have a role to play for the Seleção? You know, we all saw Saudi Arabia beat Argentina in the World Cup, and I was listening to a few opinions and kind of some interesting information about how that league is a kind of up and coming league. Of course, it's nowhere near the level of the European leagues, but you know, perhaps the level of play, you know, isn't that bad as we would kind of think about it on the face of it. So again, yeah, maybe like Nathan says, I think that's a good point. Perhaps he was a little bit tired of just you know, having constantly to face these kind of, you know, stories, and a lot of them fabrications, and even if they're not fabrications, you know, just really articles focusing on so many of the negative aspects surrounding Cristiano Ronaldo. Whereas over there, I mean, Matt, it was amazing listening to the description he gave of Messi and Ronaldo, how they were viewed in Qatar by the, you know, the fans, and like Nathan says, they were, you know, they're pretty much worshipped there. You know, they're not questioned nearly as much as they would be if they were playing in Europe. So yeah, maybe that's the environment, and it's like you said also to start with, Danny. You know, he's kind of earned over 20 years of brilliance and hard work and talent. He's kind of earned the right to be in this position where he can just perhaps take it easy, you know, in terms of football for the next couple of years. It's going to be interesting though, you know, like I said, he hasn't shown any signs publicly of wanting to slow down or wanting to step away from the national team. So, you know, maybe, who knows, maybe even from a football sense, this does kind of make a little bit of sense for him. You know, he'll be unquestioned there in terms of his place in the team. If he can, you know, if he can keep himself fit, keep himself sharp, albeit in a lower level, you know, then this is of course the big if he is prepared to play for Portugal in a reduced role, you know, it could actually work out from that point of view as well.
The last thing I want to speak on the Ronaldo move to Saudi Arabia is this, and it's you know, a $200 million deal, or I'm sorry, a $500 million or 500 million euro deal. It kind of for the player that he is, for the type of money that we're talking about, and for what it could mean for, you know, for football in the Middle East, and with all the glitz and glamour that it can possibly be. Guys, this is a pretty boring debut picture. And I'm taking this right from your site, Tom, the story that you guys have running here. That's not a lot of fanfare. And I think, you know, I don't know if they were trying to get ahead of it, and I'm sure there's going to be an absolutely amazing presentation of Ronaldo in the coming days. But this is a bit underwhelming. Is it not, boys?
It's not quite the same as his unveiling at Real Madrid all those years back.
No, I don't think there's going to be. You know, I mean, the Ala Madrid chant at the end where the place went nuts, and who's to say that I'm just. It was almost fitting that this is the first kind of image to this kind of. I don't know. It's just I'm gonna we'll stop sharing that, and we'll stop with the the pleasantries, I guess, on that. It was just like, I'm like, oh, of course, it looks like that. There's not even there's no club background. There's no club. I don't know. Anyway, but all the best to Ronaldo, all the best to Cristiano, and this next part of his career. He's signed up for 2.5 years. Who's to say what happens in the summer of 2025? Who's to say what happens in the summer of 2024 when the Euros come around? But we shall see what happens there. We're talking with Tom Kundert and Nathan Motz of Portugal.net. They are kind enough to join me here on the final episode of 2022. We're on episode number 75 of the Seleção podcast. Someone that we won't see in the summer of 2024, even though he so many times told us he had a contract all the way through the summer of 2024, was Fernando Santos. This is the first podcast that I have done since it was announced that he and the Federation, I guess, Tom, for in terms of legalese, it was a mutual separation. And I don't know about you guys, but I think when it finally was announced, because I believe Portugal was December the 10th, Portugal was eliminated. I believe the announcement was on the 14th, 15th. I don't have it written down here, but there was a part of me that I was like, he's going to survive this. But I think the overwhelming feeling that I got from when the initial reports were that he was getting canned, and then when or that he wasn't going to continue, I should say. And then when it actually was official, it was almost like the vitriol and the me wanting him out. Obviously, it ended, but I just started thinking of Fernando Santos more fondly than I did in terms of happy that he was out. I don't know if that was something that you guys maybe saw or felt, but I would say the last almost 2 years, I think that he has overstayed his welcome. But now that it was made official, I kind of like, you know what? I'm glad that it's over now. But now I'm okay saying, thank you. And I had always been, but the whole thing was we could always say thank you for what he's done and be of the opinion that it had run its course. But now that it has run its course, I think the majority of us, I won't speak for everybody, but I will remember the Fernando Santos era fondly with the beginning, and just hoping that it would have, materialized into something even more. But I guess I just felt more fondness for Fernando Santos now that it was officially over. What about you guys? Tom, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely got that sense here in Portugal. I think most people, some more than others, really wanted him to be relieved of his duties as Portugal manager for a long time, probably at least the last couple of years. But yeah, it's very interesting because you're absolutely right, Danny. The feeling here from Portugal, even the way it was announced and all the reaction afterwards, was immediately one of gratitude. You see it so often in football when you're fed up of a manager, you want them to go, they're left, and the kind of feeling is good riddance, or at last. You didn't really get that at all here in Portugal. I don't think people recognised, first of all, that the kind of man he is. I think he's a good, honest man. We all know he's very religious, of course, and is someone who I don't think anyone can doubt that he always tried his best and he always did what he thought was the right thing to do. And so there's none of that really kind of bitter, hard feelings that you sometimes get when a manager tends to, or is seen to have outstayed his welcome. Yeah, and I was actually quite, pleased about that because we just talked about Ronaldo, haven't we? Now it's a little bit of a kind of messy end to his club career, perhaps his international career. But with Fernando Santos, despite the fact that most people did think he did outstay his welcome, I think everyone was just really grateful to what he's done, recognised that he did really good work at Portugal. This is the guy, he's still the guy, we have to remember, who has brought Portugal their only ever, major trophy in the whole history of the Portuguese game. So he will forever be a huge part of, the Portuguese, the annals of history of Portuguese football, and no one can take that away from him, and nobody wants to take that away from him. So yeah, I think it was done quite nicely. Even they made a video, of course, didn't they, almost simultaneously when it was announced, saying Obrigado, Fernando Santos, and showing his best moments. And then he himself gave also a simple little video, a couple of minutes, just basically saying, thank you for this opportunity. This was something I'd always wanted to do in my life. And it's, I'm just very grateful for the opportunity. So yeah, it was, I think that was nice. It was kind of a celebration rather than, people saying, I told you so, or this should have happened a long time ago, or, at last, or good riddance. Instead of that, it was just really just a celebration. Okay, that chapter is over, but now is not really the time to, step on a man when it's down. It's just to say thank you for your service. Time to move on.
Yeah, Nathan, what about you? I just felt that the way that the feeling that a lot of us had at the end of the Euros last summer, with the way that they played for the majority of the tournament, wasn't a great tournament. And to be fair, the last few years, I think we can all agree that in terms of on paper, Fernando Santos did not get the most out of this national team that, again, us as fans thought that he could have. But I just felt I didn't feel that with Portugal bowing out in the quarterfinals to Morocco. I didn't feel like it was this is at the feet of Fernando Santos. This is unbelievable. I didn't get that feeling this time. Mm-hmm. But I also feel that because of the way that the World Cup went, and the past results being what they were, it just felt like it was the right time now, or that the ending wasn't as Tom mentioned. There wasn't a lot of negativity with the end. It was just like, okay, I think we can all agree, and maybe the FPF also, obviously, and Fernando Santos too. I just felt that I think everyone was kind of in agreement that, all right, this has run its course. It's time for a new direction.
Yeah, and I was very frustrated over the last year or two. I think most of us were. The Serbia result, the Spain result, and to see us kind of repeat those errors. But like Tom was saying, once the announcement was made that he was moving on, I felt all that frustration and negative energy just break. And instead, all I felt was gratitude for, what he brought. And I'm hoping that attitude can be available not only for Fernando Santos, but for Ronaldo when he leaves as well, even though circumstances are not always, characterized as positive around, either of those two figures. But I think we're all better off, honestly, if we're reflecting on the wonderful moments that Santos was a part of. And it's something Tom and I discussed the other day. It would be a bit prideful, I think, to say that we should have won the World Cup this time around because of the players we have. And the World Cup is the World Cup for a reason. It's a very difficult tournament to win. I think only 8 nations have ever done it, something like that. And to bow out in the quarterfinals of any World Cup that's a normal occurrence in football. Sometimes things just don't work out. And I definitely agree with you. You could say this or that or the other thing about how we played against Morocco, but in the end, we didn't get it done, and it definitely was not all Fernando Santos's fault. So I was glad for that. I was happy to see the response of people. I think that was mature of the supporter body across the Portuguese follower community, to react in that way, given how much cynical energy there was toward him before the build up to the World Cup. So I'm glad that he's moved on, but I think in his wake, there is a bit of a void there. And I don't think it's going to be quite as easy to fill as some people think. I think some people think we're going to find a new character to harness the collective talent of this group of players, the new golden generation, and it's just going to click like that. And I think that's a bit hopeful. I think it can be done, but I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And I think people are they're going to understand how difficult it is for any manager, no matter who it is, to assemble the group of players that not only look good on paper, but when you put them on the pitch, they perform as expected. I think that's a much harder task. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what we will see what happens with this new quote unquote golden generation. You know, the first go around in the early to mid 90s. Arguably some of the best players to ever play for this national team. Yet, really came away with nothing at the senior level. Didn't get the right combination of manager and player cohesion. It's something that is going to be very interesting to see. And one of the reasons why I was kind of delaying the having an episode following the Fernando Santos, I guess, dismissal, retirement, whatever it is, resigning, is that there was, there have been national teams that have let go of their managers from the World Cup who have already hired their replacement. Spain has done it. I believe the Netherlands have done it, just to name a few, or name a couple, I should say. The qualifying for the European Championships in 2024 begin in March. There are no camps. There are no, there's nothing really going on national team wise that would necessitate a hire as we speak right now. There were reports, obviously, that Jose Mourinho was approached. I believe that he has said no to those to those, I guess, those offers, at least right now. I don't see any other name being thrown around in terms of outside of the current program with the national team. I think Louis van Gaal has retired, but I believe he's famous for saying, because I believe he lives in Portugal, so he's like, I'm retired, but if Portugal calls, I'm listening. But Tom, are we just looking at Rui Jorge for 2 years? Is that what you think is probably going to happen? Almost like, because you don't want to call someone a caretaker for 2 years, but I mean, could we just have a promotion and then see what happens with the Euros in 2024?
Yeah, the longer it goes, the more that looks to be the most likely scenario, I would say. It is a bit strange that they haven't. Not only has no one been contacted or no one been approached officially, there's really not been much talk of who the FPF are going after. Apart from the Mourinho, talk at the start of it, there was talk that perhaps he would try and combine his duties as Roma coach with the Portugal coach. It's interesting because that's not the first time that's happened. I remember when he was at Real Madrid, that suggestion actually came up again. But obviously that's, I think, a little bit arrogant from the Portuguese journalists or the Portuguese FPF. How would a club really, agree to kind of, letting their manager have such a big other focused rather than, the club who's paying them their wages every week. So yeah, that was a bit of a non-starter. And of course, we also have to look with the possibility of Jose Mourinho being Portugal coach, that his history with Ronaldo, of course, didn't end brilliantly, we have to say, his relationship. And, I remember, it's funny, isn't it, Danny and Nathan, for all these years, I've been saying, I hate the way that when people talk about Portugal, it all boils down to Ronaldo. But right now, it seems that Ronaldo is a really big question that has to be kind of solved by the next Portugal manager. Looking at it positively, we all know Portugal have an incredible amount of talent. They've got the potential to be one of the best sides in the world. They are one of the best sides in the world. But, we've got this big question hanging over the Seleção at the moment of, how do you accommodate Cristiano Ronaldo if Cristiano Ronaldo continues his legitimate ambition to be part of this team. And so I suppose, again, playing into that, the most logical solution would be someone from the FBF structure, Rui George, who perhaps, again, trying to think if memory serves me right, maybe, I'm not sure if he actually played with Ronaldo when he was at Sporting, but same kind of time. And of course, he'll know all the players perfectly, like the back of his hand, having been under 21 coach for more than 10 years. He's seen practically all these players who are now Portuguese seniors have played under Rui George. And his, a lot of people criticize him for not winning a trophy at the under 21s. He's always said that that's not my main job. My main job is preparing players to make sure that they can make the step up and they can be useful for the full national team. And you can argue he's done a very good job at doing that. The supply line has been very smooth from that point of view. So yeah, I wouldn't mind Rui George, to be honest. I wouldn't mind, and I think that's perhaps his personality and his position at the FBF makes it a viable solution. In that, if things go very well, obviously he'll probably stay on. If things don't go so well, he'd probably just step back down and continue as the under 21 coach. And I don't think it would really, ruin his reputation or lessen his kind of standing in the eyes of the FBF people. He's worked there for 10 years. He's done a good job. They know what he can do. So yeah, that seems, I'd say, to cut a long story short, Danny, who's going to be the next Portugal coach? I'd just say the longer we hear without any news, I think the more and more likely it will be Rui George taking a step up.
Nathan, what about you? What do you think in terms of I guess there isn't much of a coaching search so far, other than the reported Mourinho courtship here. But the longer it goes, are you in agreement with Tom that the likelihood of Rui George being the next senior manager for this national team is more and more likely?
Yeah, I am, and I said initially I wouldn't have as much of a problem with Rui George as some, and immediately I think the response from a lot of supporters is concern over the fact that he hasn't won at the junior level. Say unlike Carlos Queiroz, who won with the under 21 sides and then became the senior side manager and immediately failed to qualify for the World Cup, and had some real difficulties there. But I don't think we should necessarily expect history to repeat itself just on that one occurrence. I think that Rui George understands the way to get the best out of the attacking blend of players that we have in particular. And when I survey the landscape, I really don't, that there really isn't one figure, even Mourinho, who really comes to the surface as a clear favorite to take over at this point in time. I think Mourinho's got a good thing going on in Roma, and I don't think he should be willing to break that off at this point and come.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Coach the national team just because people think that he's the most competent manager. I think the style that he would bring to the side is possibly not what Portugal need at this particular moment in their history, and that's not a knock on Mourinho either. I just think that that's not really what we're looking to do at this point. But I think really that FPF need to clarify their ambitions. What are they trying to do? Because I think that there's been a history. When me and Tom and Simon wrote the history of the Portuguese national team, it was a lot of the history of tournament outcome was affected heavily by the FPF and its intermingling with the circumstances in each individual tournament. I think we need to have a real clear path ahead from them on.
You mean this book?
That book right there.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the delay hopefully is them looking for the right candidate. But if it's just a matter of putting Rui in as a caretaker status, I'm okay with that. I don't think this team will have a hard time with that. I really just think we need some new ideas, fresh perspective, and really I think he can give that. So I'm not too concerned about it, and I think that we have a very competitive team at this time, with or without Ronaldo. and hopefully the manager that comes in will be able to, as Tom said, find the solution that works best for all parties.
Because it wouldn't be a quote unquote splash hire, I think you will automatically get the initial, stuff isn't going to change where they're hiring from within. It's obviously the same philosophy, and the philosophy here with the national team, and Tom and I have talked about it. And I think we talked about it, Tom, when after the loss to Serbia, which is in November of last year, was I think Fernando Santos was infamous for saying in that interview on TV where he says, my job is for Portugal to qualify for major tournaments. And as long as I do that, I've done my job. And we both thought that was a bit tone deaf, even though, yes, his job is to get Portugal to participate in these tournaments. So I think that the initial, if it ends up being that Rui Jorge does take over and gets promoted, it would be like, it's not a splash hire. It might be more the same in terms of what the ambition of the FPF might be. If there is a name out there that you guys have not heard, but just, either available or who you would like to see, in the last episode, I was so thankful to Matthew Marshall for joining me from Qatar, and Tom, you guys had great episodes for Portugal from Qatar with you and Matthew, but he is inevitable. Jose Mourinho. That's what Matthew thinks at some point in his career for the national team. But are there names out there that you guys fancy, for lack of a better term, that are either available now or just out there that you guys would like to see at least maybe be considered for this job as a manager of the national team?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Choosing a manager, you only really know like that famous João Pinto quote, prognóstico só depois do fim do jogo. I'll only give my prediction at the end of the game, because you just don't know how it's, you don't know how it's going to turn out, do you? Basically, its results are going to determine if it's a good hire or it's not. You can talk about managers. Paulo Fonseca. I've always liked Paulo Fonseca. I've always thought he's a really top-class manager, good attacking manager, plays kind of Portuguese way in some ways, flair football, ball on the ground, playing what I'd say the right way. But he hasn't been in his new post for that long, has he, at Lille? And I think he's settling in there. So, I'm not quite sure he'd be willing to give that up. And AVB is another one who kind of springs to mind. His, of course, the big advantage of him is he's available at the moment. He's not at a club. So quite a few people have mentioned his name. I think there's one thing we have to remember here, Danny, is that, we're at this kind of, what's the word? It's a strange time to be for the Portugal national team. It's in a bit of a state of flux. We're not quite sure what direction we're going to go in terms of the coach, especially. But you have to remember, Portugal still have fantastic players, and players like Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva. They're not going to be content to let's just kind of, play around for 2 years, see what happens. They're at the peak of their game. They're at the peak of their career. I was saying to Nathan, this World Cup and probably the next Euros, it's their best chance. Hopefully next World Cup as well, but even the next World Cup, perhaps, they'll be a little bit on the other side of their career. But not their top players at top clubs. So they want to give themselves the best possible chance of getting trophy and getting silverware. So whoever the manager is, I don't think this is a case of, kind of, let's take it easy. Let's do a little bit of experimentation. Let's see what's going to happen. Whoever the next manager is, he's got to have that burning desire to get the very best out of this team and use this what remains, an incredible set of players that Portugal have to the best of their abilities. And let's see what happens, because I'm pretty sure that, forget Cristiano Ronaldo in terms of his burning desire, Bernardo Silva and Bruno Fernandes don't get to where they have in the game without the exact same ambition and the exact same desire to make the most of their talents and to win every trophy or win every competition they enter. They consider themselves the best player in the world, the best players in the world in their respective positions. And, all bias aside, I think that's not too wide of the mark. And so, yeah, I'm not really too fussed in terms of who the next manager would be. I don't really, in my mind's eye, I don't think, that will work. No, that won't work. That would definitely work. I just think whoever comes in, they have to have a clear objective. The players have to get behind them, and they have to know that, okay, World Cup is over, Euro 2024. Let's go for it. That's the target.
Nathan, what about you? Is there someone out there that you think, but just someone you'd like to see, perhaps get the opportunity if it was presented to them with this current crop of players?
I mean, I'll borrow a little bit of a conversation I had with Tom last night surrounding one guy who's definitely not available, but I think is really good about getting the maximum amount of output from the talent that he has available. It's Ruben Amorim at Sporting. If you look at the squad he's got right now.
Oh, Tom would hate that.
Yeah, I know Tom would hate it, but hey, listen, it's trade-offs, right? Sporting, maybe
country over club. Tom, don't be selfish.
I'm just, but just to answer the question, I mean, I think he would do a fantastic job with this group of players. Obviously, he's not available, so it's a bit irrelevant. But someone like that is someone ambitious and maybe a little bit younger too. Just someone who's willing to put some bold ideas out there and inspire the players to reach their ceiling. I think the frustration we've all had is we all believe the ceiling's very high with all of our players, and no one seems to be really reaching that. Joao Cancelo was poor this tournament. Bernardo Silva he ran a lot, but he wasn't himself this tournament. Joao Felix had his moments. Rafael Leao it's flash in the pan type stuff. He just really hasn't reached that ceiling for the national team that we all would hope. And so, you need a manager like that. I think someone said Sergio Conceição would also be a good option. He too is unavailable, of course, but just someone who can really galvanize the squad. And I think there needs to be a long conversation had with the FPF about their objectives and being very clear. This is the type of team, the type of identity of we want to be as a footballing nation, and then find the person who gets after those objectives. And I agree wholeheartedly with Tom. I think so much of us here are looking for like the right personality, or maybe even notoriety. Someone who's been around and has done it before. But I don't really think that's what that necessarily requires. We just need someone who's going to be kind of in clear coherency with the vision, as is directed and puts the right players on the pitch to achieve it. I think this team already has, like Tom said, I mean, these players are in their prime. They're ready. They just need some different ideas and a more clear direction, and maybe something a bit more inspiring than just let's qualify for a tournament and I don't know, maybe get out of the group stage. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that I think this group of players is probably looking for maybe a bit more than that as well.
Yeah, and not to be an ageist, because I try not to be as I get older every day, but I think an injection of youth and an injection of just a newer approach is I think what this national team fan base is maybe looking for. And it isn't a cure all, because the way in which we have our European Championship was done with grit, with hard-nosed defense, and being opportunistic. But I think that was one of the frustrations that we had with Fernando Santos towards the end. Was it felt for the most part that those kind of tactics were still being used with what we consider thoroughbreds on the attack. And I think what we want to see as fans is just have someone be appointed who's going to get the most, especially out of the attacking style of that the potential that this national team could have. That Switzerland match in the round of 16 was such a fool's gold. Who knows? Don't know. Maybe everything just clicked for the national team that day, but it was one of those. To a man, everybody was like, "Why couldn't this be the way that we play all the time? Why didn't Fernando Santos ever do this more and more?" And I don't think he didn't try to do it purposefully. It just maybe didn't happen. And again, not to be ageist, but an old dog doesn't learn many new tricks towards the end. But I think what a lot of the fans of this national team is looking for or are looking for is just a new approach to or just a we want to see the attack given the team that we have. And I think not only goals are not going to be the number one thing, because you also have to play defense. And to be fair, the defense has not been as good as it was in the last few years. I would say and a lot of injuries happen to be a reason for it, with Pep in and out. Ruben Dias has had some injuries in the last year. Nuno Mendes in and out. João Cancelo in and out. So there hasn't been the cohesion in the back, but I just think a rejuvenation of this attack and this approach to the national team is what I guess normal fan of this national team would be looking for. Tom, no, do not be nervous. Ruben Amorim has a contract through 2026. I looked it up.
I had to say it. I mean, he's a good manager. I like him. I think he'd do a good job with this.
I also think I think of the Ruben Amorim Sérgio Conceição choice, I would go with Ruben Amorim. And this has nothing to do with me being a Benfica guy, because I mean both those guys are not Benfica guys, but I just think Sérgio Conceição is a classic club manager. He's another guy who gets a lot out of his team. I just don't know if it would work in a national team setting for him. Just a gut feeling on my part. He does a tremendous job with Porto, and any club would be lucky enough to have him as their manager. That's the Benfiquista in me talking too. But I just think if I had to choose between the two of them, I think Ruben Amorim might be the guy that I would go for if I was trying to pry someone from their job between those two. The job itself, it is we are at a changing point in this national team. Not only are we likely saying goodbye to Cristiano Ronaldo in terms of the player that and the contributor that he once was, but it is a national team influx, new manager, star player likely going out. So it'll be interesting to see how the FPF sells this job. I think is the number one thing. Is Ronaldo is still, I think, going to cast a shadow, and if he's banging goals in Saudi Arabia, who's to say that he doesn't still get a call up? But it's just, I think the quote unquote marketing of this job is going to be very interesting to see how it's presented to potential candidates on who's going to take it over, and how it's presented to managers. But I think the three of us are probably in agreement that after all this, it'll probably be Rui Jorge. Yes?
I think so, yeah. I think also one thing we have to remember is just the fact that it will be a different manager. I think that will give Portugal a boost, almost whoever it is. Just, Fernando Santos, he's been Portugal's longest serving manager since 2014. That's a long time. That's a long time, isn't it?
Especially in international football too.
Exactly. Yeah. It's and so of course, in international football, there's a lot more turnaround, or there is a lot of turnaround in terms of, new players come in, old players retire. But even so, the vast majority of those players would have been listening to Fernando Santos. I think that was really one of the biggest problems, rather than even his tactics. Just the fact that it's the same message being said again and again and again, it loses its freshness. It loses, people not consciously even not wanting to, but not taking on board what he's saying, perhaps, and just a new manager. I mean, we see it in club football all the time, and also in international football, just immediately gives everyone a lift, some new ideas, just a new voice, a fresh voice. And we've said it, and Nathan just mentioned the players there. There's no lack of talent in this Portugal side, and I'm sure there's no lack of ambition either. So hopefully that, the famous new manager bounce, whoever it is, if it's Rui Jorge, get a good start, and then he can really build on that. Because just look at the recent past. Paulo Bento, can you remember when he came in after Queiroz? Brilliant start, immediately. The result in qualifying, I think we were in, we started that qualifying campaign terribly, didn't we? And which led to Carlos Queiroz being sacked. In came Bento immediately. Just kind of, I remember especially his effect on Ronaldo just completely re-energized him, re-energized the whole team, and kind of just went from strength to strength for the first few months and years of his tenure. Same thing even with Santos. When Bento left, that had all gone a bit stale. Santos comes in. I think it was 8 games, was it? 8 straight victories in qualification games.
9.
9, yeah.
Because they opened up with that 1-0 loss to Albania of all teams.
That's right, yeah.
And then 2 days later, Paul Bint was fired.
That's right, exactly, yeah. And then they won every single game, yeah,
Yep.
Every single competitive game, up until Euro 2016. That didn't go too badly either, did it? So, so yeah, just I'm not, I'm always quite optimistic. Just looking at this, luckily, we've got reason to be optimistic. Looking at this Portugal squad, so I'm just hoping whoever comes in. I think it's really important, like Nathan said, for the FPF, even if they don't say it publicly, to say it to them, to set their goals, to set an ambitious goal, and to just set a goal, a realistic but an ambitious goal. Not to be kind of wishy-washy. There's this kind of feeling that, like I said, Portugal in a little bit of a state of flux. Okay, it's natural, cycles, they come and go. You can be in a state of flux, but your goal and your objective shouldn't be in a state of flux. You should know exactly what you're aiming for. And I think this could, be a good opportunity for whoever it is. Hopefully, Rui Jorge, imagine he starts off with 2 or 3 wins, good convincing results. And then that's it. Okay, we're all set for this next 2-year cycle.
Well, Tom, the group couldn't be easier.
Yeah.
In the Euros. I mean, it's on paper.
That's not necessarily a good thing, of course.
Yeah, well, but again, but maybe, yeah. As we all know, what likely is supposed to happen sometimes does not with this national team. But I talked to Matthew Marshall about this in our wrap up to the World Cup. We've talked a lot about Ronaldo, obviously, in this episode, and we've talked about Ronaldo for years and years on this podcast. And in, Tom, you've written so much about him, and Nathan, you as well. I categorized these 2 players like this for this national team. Ronaldo was the talent, but Pep was the heart. And I was very skeptical of Pep's contribution to this national team in this World Cup, simply because at 39 years of age, the knocks were becoming more frequent. They were lasting longer. He was playing less. And I was very skeptical as to what he could probably bring this go around in the World Cup. He did not start the first match against Ghana, had to start perhaps because Danilo was hurt. Maybe it was just to give him a few more days rest. Maybe it was to start him all along in the second match of group play. But again and again, Pep showed just how important he was to this national team. And I joked with Matthew in a meme that I saw where there's a picture of Ruben Dias and Pep together. And the initial quote is, who's going to be the guy who replaces Pep once he retires to sit with Ruben Dias in the back. And the meme is, well, maybe we should be looking at who's going to be replacing Ruben Dias when Ruben Dias retires, because Pep may play forever. Tom and Nathan and Nathan, I'll start with you, because your indoctrination into this national team kind of coincides with Pep's entire career and the start of his career, and what a career it's been for this player. And who's to say that it's over? But if I had to guess, he's probably played his last game with the national team. And if it is, what a way to go out with a broken arm, almost equalizing against Morocco. But talk to me, Nathan, about your feelings on Pep and his legacy with this national team, because I think it's one of the greatest this country's soccer national team has ever seen.
It's such a great story, and I remember him in 2008, back when I had just gotten into Portuguese football a couple of years prior, and there was Pepe against Turkey in the 2008 Euro group stage, bursting forward to get on the end of a kind of a helter-skelter sequence of play up the field to finish and score, and that kind of was a preview of what we've all come to love about Pepe. It's not just the tenacity and defense, his ability to read the game, just the fact that he never gets flustered by any striker. I mean, we played against Belgium in the Euros, and everyone was saying, "Oh, Romelu Lukaku is going to run him wild," and Pepe just mastered him the entire time. It was effortless, and we've seen that so many times now, it's almost boring. To the point where we know when Pepe steps out on the pitch, it's just going to be a display of just timeless brilliance that, writers could wax eloquent about for weeks on end. And it's just so it's stirring the way that he plays the game. I was telling Tom last night, he starts in defense, but as the game wears on, he's everywhere. All of a sudden, he's on the wing. Then he's playing striker. Then he's nearly scoring the crucial goal, to tie the game against Morocco, and had he not broken his arm in the process, you wonder how that might have gone, and it's just, he was such a warrior, and he was such a devil to so many, but to the Portuguese supporter community, he really was the spirit, the soul of the team, and just such an inspiration, I think playing tandem with Ronaldo, having Pepe in defense and Ronaldo, at the top of the formation, you just felt, that we had at least two players who could deliver something special. And, Pepe had his moment. Euro 2016 was a masterclass in the art of defending, especially the final, but really all throughout that tournament, he was just sensational. And I would say well behaved as well. That tournament, none of the play acting and the kind of some of the nonsense that does kind of wear on some people. None of that was present in the Euros, and it just let his brilliance come out in just unbesmirched, and it was just something to behold. He's a player for me that probably will not get the respect he deserves on an international level, but I think I would stack him up against any of the all-time great defenders and choose him in my starting 11 if it were up to me. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Danny, you mentioned once or twice our podcast. I would urge anyone to go back and listen to your podcast with Matt. After the end of the World Cup, brilliant podcast there, and it was really interesting, wasn't it? I think when you were talking with Matt about this and the point that he was making about that toughness, which Pep has, just a real toughness, which perhaps some of the younger generation players don't have anymore, and it's not even a Portuguese thing here we're talking about. Perhaps it's, universal, which these players are so, multi-millionaires at such a young age and got the whole world at their feet that they you can kind of understand it in a way. You know, perhaps they're not kind of so driven as someone like Pep, who just seemed absolutely driven and continues to be absolutely driven. It's very interesting, your question you put there, Danny, if it was his last game. You know, he hasn't retired yet. Pep, officially, he hasn't retired. There's been no word of that. And I'd say that is one position, you know, talking about the actual, just looking at the game of football itself, that is one position where you can get away with playing, obviously, goalkeeper, and I'd say centre-back were the positions you can get away with playing, you know, to a much older age than other positions, you know, especially using their, you know, positional awareness and their experience. Pep's always in the right place. So, yeah, I actually wouldn't be surprised if Pep carries on for the, you know, for the next Euros.
Yeah, it's you know, the next matches are in that window is March the 20th through the 28th. Don't have the Portugal schedule here, but I mean it's not. I guess it's not with. It's a possibility he still goes, Tom and Nathan, and I mean considering
we have to remember, like, sorry, Danny, just to
go ahead.
You, but yeah, like I say, centre backs. Ricardo Carvalho was the oldest outfield player that Portugal ever called up at 2016. Fernando Santos, you know, and he was, I think he was 39, if memory serves me right. And he played the first 3 games, of course, the first 3 group games, you know, and for, you know, different kind of centre-back, but also an absolute legend of a Portugal player. So, yeah, you know, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think Pep himself, it's very interesting again, Matt kind of alluded to it, and I never thought about this, but I think he's probably right. Pep had this injury before the World Cup, you know, quite a serious injury. Lots of people doubted he'd make it for the World Cup, and he didn't play for Porto for 6 weeks prior. Now, I think he'd possibly come to an agreement with Sergio Conceição that said, okay, my focus now is the World Cup. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to forget about Porto for the next 6 weeks. I just want everything to be geared towards the World Cup. And he actually made his comeback in the final Porto game, but he played like 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So you can, and he even spoke about this. I think Fernando Santos spoke about this prior to the World Cup, saying that, you know, he really wanted to thank Porto as an institution who they worked really hard with Pep to get him ready for the World Cup. So all of that kind of shows you, well, you don't really need that, do you? You just look at the way Pep's played over the last 15 years or so, but it really does mean, it's amazing, isn't it, when you think he's Brazilian born and he came to Portugal when he's, you know, a late teenager playing for Marítimo, 18 or 19, but he really feels that it's almost his duty, his obligation to give absolutely everything he's got to the national team. So yeah, I really do hope he stays on, because I think he's a great influence, even if perhaps he can't, you know, continue to play every game. If he plays half the games, for example, I'm sure he's a great influence to have in that squad.
Yeah, March the 23rd, we will see if Pep will be on the field when Portugal hosts Liechtenstein. And if you guys haven't heard, Portugal's group for qualification for Euro 2024, Portugal, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Iceland, Slovakia. These are not world beaters of football. Whoever the manager is should be fine. I think Pep could probably handle himself against that qualifying group. You know, not trying to make an arrogant statement. It's just, you know, the state of those national teams compared to the Portugal national team talent alone. It should be, and again, Tom, we laugh when we say should with this national team. It should be an easy route to qualification for Euro 2024, but that is why they play the games. The last thing I want to ask you guys about, and we are on the younger side of things, so we never watched Pele play, but he sadly passed away after dealing with so many medical issues, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family and all who loved him and followed him and influenced by him, like so many of today's football players are, because there would be no Ronaldo, there would be no Messi, there would be no Mbappe. The list goes on and on without Pele, and he was the first bona fide superstar that this sport ever saw. A world star, a global ambassador, and someone who just seemed to just love playing the game of football. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about the player because I never saw him play, but you could just tell the influence that he's had on today's game. Tom, I'll start with you. I guess what are your final words on Pele and your thoughts on Pele and his influence on the world and the game of football?
Yeah, you can't really overstate it, can you? I remember when I was a kid growing up and just fanatic on football, and just learning about the game. And Pele was always just had his own kind of statute, didn't he? He was on a different level to everyone. He was the king, he was known as the king, wasn't he? Because also at that time, because we, it was a little bit before our time, so we didn't know the other players so well. But and there was never this kind of just what would come to pass with Ronaldo and Messi, where there was this huge rivalry. He was really just on a pedestal on his own. And so, yeah, it's interesting hearing about his life and life story. You said there, when he obviously came from really poor background, like a lot of these Brazilian superstars. And I just remember reading the story that he's just one of the reasons that he learned his first skills. He just used to play with a pair of rolled up socks. He didn't have a ball even to play with. So he just used to kick around, get a couple of his socks, roll them up into a ball, and then just practice his skills on that. And it's a great player, of course. Here in Portugal, there's a lot of stories about him, the great friendship he had with Eusebio. He had friendships also with, lots of the greats all throughout the time, throughout history, really, Portuguese history. And I think you're right there, Danny. He kind of put football as a sport on the map, and made it a real global game. He was in some ways ahead of his time, the first global superstar, even before the age of internet and mobile phones and, even TV, wasn't it? When he started playing, there probably weren't any games live on TV or very few. So, yeah, it's impossible to overstate what a mountain of a man he is in terms of the football game.
Yeah, and the words that come to mind in reading about him and seeing clips on YouTube and everything, for me, the two words that come to mind are, one, benchmark, because he's the one that was the first player to be compared to after he began. He was the guy who set the mark, set the tone for international football, for the sport itself. And those guys after him, like Maradona, and then a classic, or our current players like Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo and Mbappe. He was the first benchmark. So that word for me is what I think of when I think of Pele, and also the word joy. He seemed like he was so happy doing what he did, playing the sport that he did, always smiling. And Nathan, I know like we're on the younger side of things here, but I don't know if he was pretty much, I think he's kind of universally like loved. And I think we're seeing that now. Obviously we see a lot of that when legends and superstars pass, but in you getting into the sport and following it as closely as you have now for the about 15 years now, what are your thoughts on his passing and his mark on the game of football?
Well, I grew up in the United States, obviously, and not just in the States, but in a part of the country where football was not the sport of choice. And so I had very little exposure to the game, but even as a child in the 90s, I knew who Pele was. That was the level of influence that he had, even in parts of the world that could not possibly have cared less about football, you knew who Pele was.
Nathan, he made it on Sesame Street for us. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's a big deal. He was an icon, not only in the sport, but in I would say in world culture. He was maybe one of the first athletes to reach that status. He was an ambassador, not only of the game, but of the aura that the game has between nations and between peoples, and between cultures at all levels, both, from the street, playing in the mud with rolled up socks, to these glamorous stadiums. Pele connected all of it together, and which was why, you would see him, in different tournaments, just kind of in the background, always there, because he's the emblem, I didn't even hear about Maradona until many years later, but Pele was always someone respected. Everyone was always trying to pull off the bicycle kick, and which was associated with him as well. And so for him to be out of the game now, it's disorienting a bit, and then you have to wonder who the next will be to fill that particular role. I don't know that anyone can. He was just such a I think a person that everyone felt so comfortable around, like you said, he brought joy, but his demeanor was so peaceful. There was no friction points between him and anyone. Unlike with characters like Ronaldo, he seemed to attract only positive interactions. He didn't create any negative aura about himself, nor could he. I don't think I ever heard anyone speak ill of him. And it's just that type of athlete is extraordinarily rare, not just for his skill, but for the way he carried himself. And so in that sense, not only a huge loss for the sport, but for humanity. I mean, just the sport's top game losing a figurehead like that is just it's very sad, and may he rest in peace.
Yep, absolutely. Just an icon. That's another word that you mentioned is I think the an apropos way of mentioning and remembering Pele. So yeah, our thoughts and prayers, and may he rest in peace to the icon of all icons in this sport. Fellas, it has been an absolute pleasure once again to be talking with you guys on the pod. I even though you guys are in two different boxes on the screen, you guys are in the same domicile in Portugal. I love that you guys have been able to hang out for the last few days, and however long Nathan decides to stay, or however long Tom decides to let Nathan stay. Depends on how, I guess, maybe New Year's Eve goes, boys. But what's on the plan for New Year's Eve tonight in Portugal, Tom?
Well, we're pretty open-ended at the moment. Perhaps going down to Praça do Comércio in Lisbon, seeing the firework display. But yeah, just taking it easy. We just had a little bit of a kickabout actually with my son. So would you believe it? I've known Nathan since before 2016, isn't it? But we've hung out quite a lot together, and that was the first time we've actually played football together. So there you go. The only thing I can say is that if it's Rui Jorge, I think you have to get Nathan to change his nationality. Maybe give him a bit of a surprise call-up.
Wow! All right, let's go, Nathan. You got some tread left on them tires, or what?
I play football like any American. I run hard, but I don't really know what I'm doing.
Kick it with your toes.
Yeah, that kind of
Well, yeah, I'm envious because the thing that I've loved about having this podcast and the relationships that we've forged just virtually and via email is seeing you guys being able to hang out personally. It's something that hopefully I can check off the old box sometime soon. And Tom, with Rui Jorge obviously leading the way for the next 4 years, because it's going to happen. I told Matthew this in the last episode. You've got, you could stay at Nathan's house, you could stay at my house. Come over to the States, enjoy the World Cup. The country is small, so you'll be able to go to all the games just like Matthew did. but yeah, I just I can't thank you guys enough for taking time out of your holiday and joining us on the last episode of 2022. Really quick while I have you guys here, thank you guys, Majin and Alex Barker, Alex Gonçalves, Philip Mishoff, who helped us preview Macedonia during the playoff. Mark Lewis from ESPN, was a joy to have him on. Alan Feely, from previewing the Nations League with Spain. The return of the Portuguese hammer Eric Vieira, the return of Craig King as we previewed Switzerland for the Nations League. Who else? We had Sean Gillen. We had the directors of the El Caso Figu Netflix documentary, David Trihorn and Ben Nicholas. Matthew Marshall had come back. Obviously, we had the great Derek Ray from Fox Sports and from ESPN. On a whim, I reached out to him and he came on, and I would say in terms of podcast success, another successful year for us. Tom, I can only imagine the site's growing more and more, and hopefully it was a successful year for everyone involved with Portugal.net. And Nathan, obviously your contributions lead to that as well. But just what I hope is just a wonderful new year and a wonderful holiday season for you guys to continue. And we'll see what this national team gives us, fellas, in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dan, thanks a lot. Just the site's going really well, and a big part of that is the Seleção pod, and what you produce. And like you said, it's definitely the best part of this, isn't it? Making the connections, building this community. It's a big community, the Portuguese, English-speaking kind of Portuguese fans, but you can include Portuguese speakers as well. I know a lot of people here actually tune in Portuguese. People also tune into this podcast because I think we're people who are serious and think about the game and have some few opinions which maybe I think are worth listening to. So yeah, great. You're doing a great job, Danny, and keep it going. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to see this podcast grow so much. And the caliber of guests you've had on, it's not just people like me and Nathan. Now you're having, real classy guests the whole time. So yeah,
I forgot to mention Krakauer. He'd kill me if I didn't mention him. So I do. Yeah, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, yeah. So yeah, great job. And hopefully, it's a hell of a ride, isn't it? Being a Portugal football fan and a fan of the Seleção, and I really don't think that's going to change. I think we've got some good times ahead. It's going to be different, of course, without Ronaldo, without Pep, whenever that time comes, it's going to be different, but I think it's still going to be a whole lot of fun.
Nathan, anything to Nathan, what's on the plan for you? I mean, I know you're at Tom's, mercy here on what you're doing, but what are we looking forward to doing tonight for New Year's Eve in Portugal? Besides resting after the big match you guys just had.
Yeah, it was a Titanic clash, but now we got a couple bottles of Portuguese wine waiting on us. So, I'm just looking forward to going and taking the edge off. I've been doing a lot of traveling. I'm actually working a lot over here in Europe right now, and it's lovely the family we've made in the Portuguese support community. Like you said, anyone who has ever associated with the site, whether I've met them or not, or I consider them family. They're welcome in my home. I would love to see them someday out, watching the Seleção or at the World Cup, in 26, when we host. And I think it's been well over a decade since I got involved with the site, and it's just been lovely. It's been a joy in my life to learn, really, not just to learn the sport, but to learn how to be a writer, a better writer. I've enjoyed that as well on a personal level, selfishly. It's made me expand that ability, and I've been able to use that even in other places outside of the sport. And so I've been honored to just grow this market and develop this intimate portrait of what I believe is a fascinating nation, not only from a footballing perspective, but just culturally. And so I'm happy to bring, a small piece of that to the world. I'm looking forward, hopefully in the next year, to have more time to focus on long form writing, tactics and players, and sharing some ideas with Tom. So, I think there's a lot to come, and I'm just, thank you again for having me. I love talking the Seleção. I love all the stories, the history, and just really what we're building. I'm here is something pure. It's beyond grassroots. It's real people, that love the sport and want to honestly deliver, the best content to people who love it just as much as we do. And so that's something that I've greatly enjoyed, and I'm just, so privileged to be a part of that.
Yeah, here. Nathan, safe travels to you. Nathan and Tom, all the best to you guys' families today, tomorrow, throughout the new year, and in the future. And can't wait to have you guys back on to talk about this next chapter of Portuguese football. But again, my thanks to both of you for coming on and making time for us once again.
Yeah, cheers, Danny. Feliz Ano Novo.
Yeah, igualmente. Yeah, Happy New Year, boys. All right, that has been episode number 75 of the Seleção podcast. Again, my thanks to Tom Kundert and Nathan Motz for joining me on this episode. We covered a lot here, guys, and it's an interesting time in this national team's history and the journey that this national team is about to embark on. Will it include CR7? Will it include Pep? Who is going to take the reins as the new manager? A lot of questions that still need to be answered as of this podcast, but we'll be here to cover those answers. Whenever they become available to us. But I thanked my guests, and I was going through the rundown of the folks that we've had on this year. I want to properly thank Eric Krakauer. His contribution to the show has been amazing. David Krachman, who helped us preview the Uruguayan matchup in the World Cup, as well as Zach Lowy of Breaking the Lines. He came on to help preview the World Cup. But the biggest thank you is to you guys and the viewers, the listeners, for helping me keep this thing going. Because while this is a passion project, as I've said so many times before, the fact that the interaction and the reach and the reaction that we get from you guys helps me keep this. It helps me keep going, and helps me, happily put out episode after episode, and content and tweets out on Twitter and the site and the podcast and the YouTube page. All of it doesn't mean much if there aren't people either watching or listening and interacting with me on social media. So for me, again, a huge obrigado to you who are viewing and listening, and I can't wait to see what happens in 2023 and see where this next chapter of Portuguese football takes us. So my thanks to everybody. I hope everyone had a great Christmas, a great holiday season, and wishing everyone nothing but the absolute best in their lives in 2023. So that will do it for the episode here on episode number 75 of the Seleção podcast. We are, of course, a proud partner of Portugal.net. Happy New Year, everybody, and Força Portugal!